Hey guys, welcome to the 21st part of my series previewing the 2020-21 NBA season. And today we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder. So last season, the Thunder finished with a 44-28 record, and they were the surprise package of the NBA as they were not expected to do well after trading Russell Westbrook and Paul George and receiving a few decent players but a lot of picks. But they ended up being the 5 seed, and they were led by Chris Paul, but they ended up losing in 7 games to the Houston Rocket in the first round. And in this offseason, they fully lent into the rebuild and traded almost everybody for a ton of first round picks. So they traded away Chris Paul, Steven Adams, and Dennis Schroeder, notably, and they received a lot of picks and a few other guys in exchange, which they traded for more picks. And then they also lost Gallinari to free agency. So 4 really key players traded and not many actual basketball players received in return, but rather future basketball players in first round picks. So then in the draft, they drafted Pokashevsky and Theo Maledon. And then they also added George Hill and Al Horford, which were 2 of the guys who they actually did receive in return in trades. And then they also got a few unnotable guys in free agency or also through trade. So, to summarize the offseason, just trading away all their key players apart from Shea and receiving a lot of picks. So, if we look at a projected starting lineup, I mean, it's really hard to tell since I suspect they'll be tanking this year, but I've gone with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Hamidou Diallo, Lou Dort, Darius Bazley, and Al Horford. So, first off is Shea, who is the franchise player now. Last season, he averaged 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, despite not being the number 1 option. And a lot of people are expecting him to take a big jump, obviously because he's just going to get more shots and he's going to be the number 1 option. I think he will in points per game. I think his efficiency will drop off a little because defenses are going to be focusing on him and he's going to be taking more shots. Shea is a pretty solid all-round player. I wouldn't say he's elite at anything. If there's anything he needs to work on to improve his game, it'd be his 3-point shooting, his defense, and his playmaking. But he's still solid at those skills, and he's just a solid all-round player. But we'll see how good he can become and how many points he can average while being the number 1 option and the face of the franchise, despite playing for a rebuilding team. And they have Hamidou Diallo. I mean, they might start George Hill, but I've gone for Diallo. He only averaged about 7 points a game last season. He has really good athleticism and he's good at finishing inside and dunking. But apart from that, he's not much else. So we'll see if he can develop into anything. And then they have Lou Dort, who has really broke out in the playoffs and in the Houston series. He's a great defender and he was tasked with guarding James Harden. His offensive game isn't great, but he's a really good defender, and I think he can be a really good player for them, especially if his 3-point shot develops. He can be one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league. And then they have Darius Bazley, who really looked good in the bubble and was given his first real chance in the bubble, and he's a really good stretch 4. So we'll see how much he'll play, but I think he's a player with some good potential, especially as a stretch 4. And then they have Al Horford, who they received by trading Danny Green, who they received by trading Dennis Schroeder. They picked up 2 first-round picks in total in those transactions. So last season, Horford averaged 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, despite playing power forward in that Sixers team that just didn't work out. But I still think he's a really good player. And can really help this team. Obviously, defensively, he's a good player with high IQ. And then offensively, he can handle the ball a bit, and he's a good playmaker. So I'm excited to see him and Shea run some pick and roll, some dribble handoffs, things like that to help Shea and get Al Horford back to his best. And I wouldn't be surprised if Horford starts playing well again, if he's maybe traded for a first-round pick, because you know how Sam Presti is. But I think he can really get back to how he was playing, maybe not in Boston, but just at least better than he was last season. And off the bench, they have George Hill, who last season averaged 9 points a game, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds. He's a really good 3-point shooter, can defend a bit, can be a secondary ball handler, with Shea being the primary ball handler. So I think he'll be a solid player for them off the bench. And they have Theo Maledon, who's a rookie, and you just don't know what you're going to get from rookies. They also have Justin Jackson, who's sort of a shooter who doesn't shoot very well, so I'm not sure how much he'll play. And they have Trevor Ariza, who was a very good 3-and-D guy and has sort of fallen off a bit recently, but I suspect he'll play a bit to try and increase his trade value, and then they might look to ship him. And then they have Pokusevski, who is a very exciting player, a very raw talent. He was playing in like the Greek second division, or like, I'm not sure what country it was, but it wasn't even the first division in that country. Like all the highlights of him are playing against like guys who are like 6 feet and unathletic, but he is a 7-footer who's been described as a 7-foot guard. He can handle it, he can pass it, and he has a very nice shooting stroke. So he has a lot of potential, and I suspect they'll play him quite a bit just to see what he is, because he could be a real player or he could be a total bust. So he has real boomer bust potential, and we'll just have to see how good he is. And then they have Mike Muscala, who will just be the backup center. I suspect they could play Poku a bit at center, but who really knows? They're not really going to be going for too many wins this season. So the roster, I mean, it isn't great, but they have Shea, who is their young centerpiece, and they have a lot of future picks. So if we look at the positive, it is the future. They are a rebuilding team. They're not going to be very good this season. They're going to be going for a high lottery pick. And they have 17 first-round picks in the next 6 years, if I'm not mistaken, between their own picks, the Rockets picks, the Suns picks, the Clippers picks, of course. They have a Sixers pick. They have a lot of picks, so they're going to be bringing in a lot of new players and a lot of draft picks, and that's very exciting but very scary. It's pretty easy to tear a team down. It's building it back up that's the hard part, and they have a real challenge with picking the right guys and making sure there's still a decent culture, and they're just not just tanking and getting used to losing, because then things can go wrong. I'm also predicting that Shea is going to take a leap, and Horford might bounce back a bit and at least augment his trade value and just his value around the league. I think him and Shea can be decent offensively, and this team can be decent offensively, like 20th in the NBA. And they also have some other young guys like Dort and Baisley and Poku, who is very exciting. Some of the negatives, they're just tanking, so they're not going to be a good team. They're not really going to want to win. They're not going to be giving 100% on defense, so that's something. And then also, like, they're the only team in the West who is clearly tanking and not wanting to win. Like, I think every other team is at least sort of trying to make the playoffs. I mean, it can go either way with teams like the Kings and the Spurs, but they're the only team that's out and out tanking, so I think they won't have much competition for the 15th spot in the West. So to summarize, they traded all their players this offseason for a lot of picks, and this season it's just basically going to be Shea, and they have a lot of picks in the future. So we'll see what happens there. But just for this season, I don't think they're going to be very good, but they do have a lot of picks. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys.